So I just wanted to thank you all for coming again, and this is a response to several people who wanted to take part in more conversation, and so here we are. And there have been a few people who either got stuck in traffic out of town or couldn't make it at the last minute who won't be here, but it is being recorded again. And I know some of you were here last week and others weren't, and I think those who weren't saw either heard the podcast version or saw the recording on YouTube. If you haven't seen or heard it, I would definitely recommend seeing it. Can you hear this where you are, Chris?
Yeah.
That's good? Okay.
Right here, though.
Right there, though. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. So, based on last week's discussion, I did a bulk or a lot of talking, and I'd like to try to open it up a little bit more for more storytelling, sharing, and maybe questions. If there was anything that stood out from last week, either that I said or anything that was impactful that maybe needed a little more unpacking, I wanted to know if anyone had anything from last week at the top of their memory that they wanted to ask any questions about at all. Anything from last week? No? Is there?
You want me to say something about last week?
Sure.
Right.
Come on up.
All right, so the one thing that really got me from last week, I was listening to it, like I started watching it from before, and I decided I was just gonna listen to it while I was at work. And the one thing that really impacted me, like I had to stop it because it brought me to tears, was the story about the well. You go into your neighbor's house about the well,
Mm-hmm.
and it hit me that I operate in a certain type of way, like it's a constant.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's something that I don't think anybody really realizes, that the whole thing about okay, if I'm on somebody's property that says that, hey, just come over, you don't have to ask every single time, you don't have to do that. But in my mind, when you said it, I was like, yeah, if anything comes up broken, missing, stolen, whatever, or somebody sees me on the property, yeah, but I know that people don't think like that. And I realized in that moment that that's how I operate when I go out from my front door.
Mm-hmm.
Or when I'm back home, or when I'm in a store, or this is like a constant thing. So I'm not naturally being myself. I'm always in my adaptive self when I engage with the world.
Right.
And at some point it's gonna break down. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's just how it is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chris.
Oh, no problem.
I'm sorry, I didn't see the podcast and I wasn't here last time.
Okay, yeah.
Could you just tell me what was it about the well?
Do you want to rehash that?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so he was explaining that he has a neighbor that says, hey, he gets water from their well, and he asks every single time, hey, is it all right if I get water from your well? And his neighbor was saying that you don't have to ask. You don't. I mean, it's okay if you come over. Just come over and get the water. But in his mindset and even in my mindset, like I totally understood, because I know if I'm in a situation or if I'm in an area that I'm not the dominant. I know if I'm in say I'm like a couple streets up. If someone sees me on somebody else's property, they're gonna look at me, and if they don't know me, then they're gonna look at me like, okay, he's a threat. He's doing something that he's not supposed to be doing, not knowing the whole situation, not knowing that the neighbor has actually said, you know, they can come over and get water. So it's a domino effect. Like, I know I can come over here, but this neighbor might not know. And if this neighbor calls the cops or anything like that, then I'm gonna have to explain to the cops. So I'm gonna have to make somebody believe something that they have no idea about. So they're just gonna go with their gut, is my understanding. And so I don't want to be in that situation. So every single time I'm be like, hey, is it all right if I come over? Every single time I would do the same thing. Like, it's out of question. So it's one of those things that I was taught as, you know, as early as 7, 8, 9. Like, yeah, you're cool here, you know, you can operate a certain way here, but you can't operate in that way there. So you have to constantly make sure everything, you know, your P's and Q's, you don't want to get caught slipping. So if you get caught slipping, then it's, you know, it's so much to unpack. It's so much to unpack under, you know, just from a neighbor saying that you can come to the well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chris.
That's all I got right now.
Did you understand?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I just wanted to share
Yeah. Come on up.
something that I just wanted to share something that my sister shared with me this past week that I would never think about this at all. But she lives in on a street with, you know, townhouses, and there's a little cul-de-sac at the end. So she has a neighbor. They're about 4 townhouses down from her, and he came running over to her one day and said, Maggie, there's a little girl, like maybe fell off her bike or something. He said, would you go check and see if she's okay? And my sister looked at him kind of like, well, you know, why didn't you just check? And she said, I could never do that. She said, I'm a black man, and if I looked after somebody else's child, he said, there was too many possible repercussions. And she said, you know, I never thought about that at all. And it saddened me, and it made me more aware.
Thank you.
I'm Roger, and the last few weeks and even over the last year, and thanks to Lance, I've done a lot of soul searching and looking inside myself, and I realized there's an element of racism in me. And maybe it's because I've inherited it from all my ancestors. Thousands of years ago, they probably hated the tribe that lived next to them. And that stuff is filtered down, and it came down to my family, especially on my father's side, because I have my grandfather on my father's side. He may not have been overtly racist, but he was. An example of that is I grew up just outside of Wichita, Kansas, and my grandfather came down to visit me one time, and my father was driving, my grandfather was on the passenger side, and I was in the middle. Now, my grandfather liked to kind of play practical jokes on people, but I didn't always take it very well. Like at dinner time, he would say, Roger, hand me the butter. And I'd reach for the butter, and he'd take my elbow and he'd push my thumb into the butter. He liked doing that kind of stuff. But in this particular day, we were driving through the black section of Wichita, and there were some black children playing on the sidewalk. And my grandfather reached over and grabbed my arm and held it up and started shaking it back and forth. He said, Roger, wave at the little black kids. I felt terrible at the time. I resisted that, and it showed me what kind of a racist he was. But he was also, of my two grandfathers, he's the one that showed more interest in me. My other grandfather, on my mother's side, well-educated, small town newspaper editor. There was a Klan gathering in the 1920s in this town, and all the businessmen were trying to get my grandfather to join the Klan, and he refused. And there was a lot of pressure put on him to join the Ku Klux Klan, and he refused to do it, which I respected. But he's also the grandfather that never paid any attention to me. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But I realized that this stuff filters down through the generations. And my father, although I never heard him say very much that was racist, but there was one incident that I do remember. He was living in a retirement home in southern part of Texas. And he was complaining to me one day. He said, that hotel down there, a bunch of darkies are taking over the hotel. Well, these were people from India, dark-skinned people from India. And then his racism just came bubbling to the top. And I just wondered how much of that I have bubbling inside of me. And I think in certain circumstances that it's possible that I act that way. And I'm going to share a little incident that happened here at Raven's Roost during this last year. We had a party inside, and people were sitting around drinking wine, and I thought, well, I'll share some of what I have. I had some hard cider, and I brought the hard cider down, I think 3 or 4 cans, and I put them on the counter and got to talking with everyone, and I looked back, and the cans of cider, hard cider, was still there. Nobody was drinking it. And I thought, well, nobody's taking advantage of what I brought to the party. And one of our young men, Anthony, was behind the counter and talking to a friend. And a little later, I looked back, and the cans were all gone. And Anthony was gone too. And I thought, well, he surely wouldn't take that, would he? And so I started looking around and making sure nobody else was drinking my hard ciders. I couldn't find the empty cans anywhere. I looked all over. And then in my mind, I started thinking, maybe Anthony took them. And I called his mother. And she said, she talked to Anthony, and Anthony swore he didn't do it. And she said, Anthony's come down to talk to you. And so Anthony came down and with a couple of other people, and we had a conversation. And I humbly apologized to Anthony for me being suspicious of him. And I think that part of that suspicion came from the fact that Anthony's a black boy. And I felt horrible about that. And this is an opportunity I felt that this is an experience that I can take and learn from. So I started processing that, and I processed it a lot. And I think I gained from the experience, but finding myself accusing someone of doing something and feeling like a part of that might have been because Anthony was black just made me feel real bad. So I don't expect Anthony to ever forgive me for that, but I sure felt bad about what I did, and it's given me an opportunity to learn from it and grow from it. Thanks.
Thank you. Sure. Come on up.
My name's Yolanda, and I live here, and I'm Latina from California. Guess my mother was born in California, so I'm kind of second generation, but grandparents, we are products of our families, and little story about my grandmother. My grandmother, she got her naturalization when she was, she came when she was 35 from Mexico, with the influx of the migrant workers coming in. They were they were shipping, they were busing Mexicans from Mexico to work the fields in Delano, California. We had Filipinos there that were brought in, and it was again we lived on the west side. The blacks, the Mexicans, the Filipinos lived on the west side. The whites lived on the other side. So it was just pretty segregated in that way. But my grandmother was, she at that time they were allowing people to take their government schooling in Spanish because it was the Treaty Guadalupe Hidalgo. Mexicans that were in the West were able to keep their language. But she used to, I go, Grandma, you live here. How come you don't speak English? And she made this comment that I do not want to be like the blacks, because the blacks were brought here and they lost their language, and she felt like she wanted to maintain her homeland, and that was a sad part. She was a bit racist also, in that but again, back to that's my story as far as my family is. The other story I have is that I was living in Los Angeles, which is not that, again, Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles. It's, it was a rough time in the the early 90s, I guess. No, late 80s. And, I was getting out of a building there on 6th and Westmoreland, and I was walking to my car, and a couple of black men jumped me, and they surprised me, and I was struggling, and and so they did take my purse. They wanted to steal my car, but I wouldn't let them. I had some golf clubs in the back, and I had just I didn't want them to steal it, but I was just getting into golf. Sorry, yeah, but anyway, so after that, I come to, every time I see anybody sneaking up behind me, I get kind of, an African American person walking, towards me. It's just kind of, I get out, and no, it's something that you have to work. Not all blacks are bad, but there are a few bad apples, and I think we need to acknowledge people. Now when I'm walking, I turn around and acknowledge, hey, and I'm ready. If anybody, black, white, Mexican, whatever, that are trying to hurt me, I'm going to be in in some alert because of my experience, and anyway, I think I've said enough. Thank you.
It is interesting how we carry the trauma. Whatever the experience might be, we carry that with us, and in some way we share it too. I was taught from a young age. I heard a lot of things about white people growing up, and whatever the experiences were that my grandparents and my parents had, I had to collect that information. I was being told that this was the way to navigate the world, right? Because of their experiences. The experiences are what they are, and it's what we choose to do with the experience once we've had it, right? It's not that, as she said, there are bad apples in every group, and it only takes one or two or a few bad apples to cause that fear to rise, and the fear begins to dominate the way you perceive the whole group, right? And in this way, this is what the nature of healing is about, right? Is that we have these traumas, we live out certain stories and drama over and over again. Even when nothing's happening, we're living it out up here. I'm seeing a situation, and I'm attached to the situation because of something in my past, or because of the past of someone in my family, right? I heard a certain story, and what I'm seeing right before me seems to fit that story, so I immediately attach the meaning to what I'm seeing, which may not be true. Most times is not true. Like, I can observe myself being the black man outside of my friend's house who's there to get water, but I'm the white neighbor who has no clue who this man is, and it seems like he's snooping around, right? These are the types of things that it's very difficult to get into the other person's shoes and take a look at what's happening and realize that our initial reaction to blame someone, or to think that someone must be guilty or someone must be at fault, that initial reaction is that's a real problem, and it's difficult to undo the damage that has been done. It's difficult to unwind or everything that we've been told, everything that we've experienced, everything the media seems to present to us about the relationship between whites or blacks or Hispanics and Italians, or whatever the group might be. Are there any more stories? Does anyone else like to share? It looks like Bruce is coming up. Okay.
So there's some hot dogs and sausages over that are ready. And I had my first two, so I'm hoping other people will help me finish them off there. They're all nice and warm. But yeah, I think everybody's got some stories. Sure. Okay. I mean, I was born in Minnesota. I'm sure it was an all-white town, a little town, about 500 people. So as far as I knew, there weren't any people there, but that's not where I grew up. My dad was in the Air Force, so we moved all around. Ended up here in Anchorage, which we all liked, and that's where my parents retired. And I went to East High School, which I think is pretty diverse. Although when I was going to school, it was mostly black and white, and maybe some natives, and not the diverse community that it is today. And must have been one day when I had missed the bus, so I had to walk from my house to school, which was doable, and got there late. And so I'm probably rushing through the hallway and trying to get my first class. And there's these three colored women, girls, whatever, coming down the hallway, all talking to each other. And I must have bumped into one slightly as I was passing her by. And next thing I know, she is pushed for me from behind, and I'm almost sprawling on the floor because I had touched her, I'd bumped her, or whatever, and I just figured it was a bad day for her, or that she had gotten a fair amount of disrespect in her life and felt like I was doing more of the same. I don't know. I feel like I've never really had any close black friends. Although I worked for a computer store doing computer sales and so forth, and we had some nice black guys there that I got along with. A gentleman named Covey, whose parents have some apartments in this area actually, and so his family seems pretty well off overall. And he and I got along fairly well, and we still run into each other and have good memories of working with each other. And then there was Billy, who was one of the other salesmen, the only black salesman. And he liked to drive his red Audi, just like a lot of folks seem to like their Cadillacs and nice cars and everything. And he and I were in the storeroom once, and he was looking for some item. And so there were some shelves in front of him, and I said, "Billy, raise your hand." So he's reaching up. And I said, "Repeat after me. I believe." And he got it, kind of. I don't know if you guys do, but kind of a church reference, whatever. He laughed and did fine. You don't get it? Okay. Yeah, I know. We both got it. I think of the church services where they're making you raise your hands, and the Spirit's going to come into you and everything. And I don't think he and I were quite along that line, but he got that I was making a joke about it. I don't know. Again, I think everybody's got his story. I hope Mr. Macon will come up, because I heard him talk at the Unitarian Church a long time ago about his experiences growing up in Mississippi and switching over to Alaska and all. And I thought it was a real nice talk that he gave. Thanks.
Thank you, Bruce. It's on a 8-foot cord here.
That racism is when you're not looking at the person, you're looking at the color of their skin. And so I remember being very shocked when I came boom up against my racism. I was looking at this couple, this really black man and this blonde woman. And I was so judgmental, like, man, why is it when these black men go for white women, it's got to be a blonde? It's not a brunette, it's not a, Hispanic, it's a blonde. Why is this? And I'm sitting there judging all these people. And then they get closer to me, and I realize, oh my God, those are my friends. I know these people. And these people were people I knew. Once they got close to me and I saw like their faces and not just the color, these were such straight shooters, boring people, church-going people. They had 3 kids, and it was nothing like a black man having a, one-night stand with a blonde woman. It was a nice couple of people, and I thought, oh my God, Dina. So I think we all have racist thoughts when we somehow don't see the people and we see the color of the skin.
This is Macon. Macon Roberts.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, yeah. And thank you so much for letting me come up and share. I was, well, let's see. Where do I start? Oh yeah, I grew up in the Mississippi Delta of Mississippi, and spent there several years, and then eventually moved to California. Yes, okay. Yeah, I when I was in Mississippi, my sister took me off the bus because I was younger, and I thought, oh my goodness, it was really kind of bad in those days because you couldn't do anything, or people didn't want you to do anything. So it changed over the years. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I went all the way to the front, and then she came and yanked me all the way to the back, and so that's how I found out things really wasn't right, helpful, and as I grew up, I really wanted to use what I had to do the best I could with it, because it was really tough in those days in the Delta. Yeah. And I'll finish by saying that because people helped me and taught me what places to go in or stay away from, of what places to be a young fella who, in those days, there was no two groups together. People would throw you in the back of the bus. You know, I had to do that a lot. So oh yeah, even the swimming pool, they took you out of that. It was only Caucasian only in the swimming pool. So it was really tough, but the thing of it is was that I was lucky to get my older sisters and so forth to help me to navigate on what was available. And eventually I learned how to be what's the word for it? Yeah, how to navigate the system and be real grateful in those days and the situation and everything that people kind of helped me to get to it. But I was very fortunate as time went on, how much I learned and how much I was able to be real nice to other people who were nice to me. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Didn't mean to be too long-winded, but I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, thank you. Okay, I got it. Thanks.
Well, since I'm up here, I may as well share a little story, and just with regard what Macon just said, I think I'm kind of far away from that that system that Macon grew up in. However, to this day, I always wondered, why is Macon insisting on getting a receipt for a piece of gum and a bag for it when he walks out of the store? And Macon does that to this day, and it's kind of like being accused of theft if you are, walking out and you get caught with something without a tag. And the other thing is that I kind of observed is Macon always locks the door. That's something really foreign to me. I mean, you leave it open, but Macon needs to have that security. Now, another little story is when I was working at UAA and I managed the swimming pool there for many years. Now, at some point, my chemicals were way off, and I had to just remind people to shower before they go in. And I thought, well, what's a humorous way to remind them, to shower before you go in the pool? And I found this cute picture of a about 10-year-old girl in a fire hydrant, and she had like little braids, little dreadlocks, and she was having a ball, with a running fire hydrant, just splashing around in there. And so I put that on the door and said, well, taking shower is fun. Take one before you go in the pool. and I thought I was pretty clever. And then I had a very upset patron who said, well, you are implying that black people are not clean, that they don't have showers at home, that they need to use the hydrant. And I felt so distressed about that. All my apologizing didn't help, but that was kind of like the unintentional racism that I kind of produced, basically. Yep.
Thank you for sharing. Something I could add on to the experience at the grocery store is, since the invention of the self-checkout line, I, in some sense, have gotten used to it, but it's always uncomfortable to walk into the self-check. I expect to be watched a little closer than others, and I definitely do not leave the self-check without the receipt in my hand. And it's the same kind of idea. It's just the acknowledging that there is the potential that you could be asked or accused of not paying for something. Any other stories?
How's it going, everybody? My name is Dennis, and I'm from Texas. I grew up in Wichita Falls, Texas. Right around to the age of 10, 11 years old. And it's a whole different world down there. Being raised as a young boy down in Texas, we were taught like Brother Macon was saying, and Chris and a couple of others, just growing up as a black young man down there, you're taught a certain degree of rules, how to navigate life and make sure that you're safe, make sure that your intentions aren't misperceived. And so going from that environment where it was a heavily racist environment to up here, a place like Anchorage, Alaska, where I went to school at West for 3 years, graduated from Bartlett. Those are two of the top 5 most diverse schools in America. Bartlett and West, and East High also being another third in that top 5, just in all from Anchorage, Alaska. And so it was a huge change growing up in a military base like Wichita Falls, being taught certain unsaid rules of the South, to coming up here and being around a very diverse population. You know, I got to meet a lot of people from different cultures and different nationalities, and it almost untrained. I retrained myself. You know, I started to see people for who they were, and all of those unsaid rules, all of those different ways that my parents and the community down in Texas taught me to navigate as a young Black boy kind of started to fall to the wayside, because I realized that there was nothing to worry about. You know, everybody was diverse, everybody was different. You know, there's all of these different cultures and friends and different people for me to learn from. I felt like I didn't have anything to worry about, and I always took pride in that because I felt like I was multicultural to a degree. I married my wife who's white, and got to know my in-laws and learned how to navigate in a totally different world. So yeah, I took pride in that. I felt like, you know, all of this racist stuff, maybe it's not as bad as, you know, everybody in the South growing up kind of taught me and led me to believe. The caveat is, in the whole retraining process, as I learned, you know, different cultures, white culture, and how my wife's family would do things, up against how my family would traditionally do things, you know, I started to notice differences, and none of those differences were good or bad. They were just different, you know. But then I started watching my family and how they responded to my retraining, and I watched my wife's family and how they processed and perceived my movements and how I navigated life. And one of the things that I noticed is that we all gravitate towards the familiar. You know, we all seek and are more comfortable in the areas of life that we can digest because they're familiar to us. And at the same time, it's very, very easy to see something that is not similar or familiar and prejudge or develop a perception in our minds that isn't accurate. And I think we're all guilty of that. I think it's something that, just as the human race, you know, we all have to be aware of. And so that's my encouragement to everybody, that when you see someone who's different, whether their hair is pink or whether they have piercings all over, tattoos, or maybe it's a skin color, or maybe they just do things that, you know, we're just not used to seeing happen. My encouragement is that before we judge or before we arrive at any preconceived notions about that individual, give them the benefit of the doubt, get to know them, build relationships, start a dialogue, start communication. And that's what I think is so beautiful about what's going on right now, is that, you know, there's communication and dialogue that crosses age, that crosses nationality, culture, gender. And that's a beautiful thing. I think that's what America's all about. And so the more that we as individuals strive to connect to people who are different and to dialogue with people who we don't understand, the quicker it's going to be a better place for all of us. And so thank you to everybody who's here. Thank you for everybody who shared their story. I think this is great. Thank you, Lance, for hosting. It's a beautiful thing, man.
Thank you.
So thank you guys.
The conversation really is valuable, and it's really important to hear your story. It's important for all of us to hear each other's experiences in this, because, you know, we can be led to think it only goes one way or the other, but it's in everyone's experience. It's in everyone's life. And how it gets passed down from one generation to the next is also part of the issue. It's what the children hear the parents saying that will carry it on. If we as parents, adults, teachers, elders, if we can be honest about the trauma and the pain that exists through racism and division, if we can be honest about that, but also make it a valuable point that when we cultivate communication and community with diverse groups of people, we can better understand each other, and we can better retell the story instead of letting the same stories kind of turn over and over again. There actually is more that we have in common than anything else, right? But for whatever reason, there's for a very long time there's been an underlying tone of misunderstanding and some fear, and they mix and they play with each other. The misunderstanding and the fear, they kind of work together and they tumble. And if we can just have experiences like this where we realize that, oh, we are actually all experiencing the same things, and in fact, as humans, we all share the same values. Those values are things like peace. I'm not interested in war or fighting, and I don't think anyone else here is. And I would guess that most of the people I interact with on a day-to-day basis are not interested in fighting or having war or arguing about anything. Another value I think we all have in common is love. We all want to be accepted. We all want to be appreciated for who we are. I think another value that we all share is freedom. That is the ability to be yourself in all places and at all times, to be able to express yourself and to be able to take care of yourself. All of this is summarized in the word freedom. Are there any other single word values that you feel like all of humanity shares? I said peace and love, and freedom. Are there any other values? Acceptance. Yes. Kindness. Awareness. Mm-hmm. Safety. Absolutely. Gratitude. Respect. Thank you. What was that? Hope. That's a good word, definitely. Yeah. We want the same things for ourselves, our family members, our children. And when we can start seeing, I don't remember now who it was who shared the story of the black man saying, I can't go and help the young girl who fell on the bike. It's obvious that we all agree that should not be the case. It should be the case, right, that we all see each other as potential family members, right? And that whoever may fall off a bike at any point in time can be serviced and helped by anyone who's walking by, right? It's that opportunity to be the Good Samaritan. But if, for whatever reason, there's a stigma or society for some reason says that you cannot be the Good Samaritan, we have a real problem where change is able to take place, right? Because it gives someone has the opportunity to serve someone else or to help someone else, but the cultural belief or this stigma is so strong that they can't even make a proper sacrifice in that moment. That's a terrible thing. That's a terrible thing. That's all I can really say about that. So my thoughts on creating change, I talked a little bit about it last week and talked about healing. And there are so many things that have happened in history as it relates to movements and protests and trying to build organizations to help us facilitate change within communities. And after hundreds of years of this, pain moving forward, I am starting to realize that organizations, rules, boundaries, protocols, bureaucracies, governments don't really create the change we're saying that we find important at this point or valuable at this point. Like, we've given all of that a chance for a very, very long time, and we do come up with some good programs. But here we are, still having to deal with the same conversation. And it is my opinion that when the community takes an intimate stand like this and what we did last week, that's where the real change is. It's real people touching each other and not creating more bodies of people or organizations, because then there's still some level of division, right? It's this organization or that organization, or will you commit your time or donate your money to this place or that place. If we can create a story of unity that starts right here, instead of thinking, oh, we need to do something else, right? This idea of having to do and be under this pressure to create something new, instead of just connecting with one another, being able to tell our stories and get these issues out on the table, and not just to discuss them, but to heal them, I'm not seeing any true change happen. And I would think that, or I'm thinking we all can see that, right? Just like it's been a long time. It's been a long time for the United States of America to wake up and have this type of conversation. And we've done a lot of rioting, and we've held a lot of signs, and we've voted a lot of people in and out, and we're still struggling with the same issues. I'd like to say that, if I can't look within myself and change, then I also can't facilitate the change. And it just begins one person at a time, one It begins one heart at a time. And here's something that has been life-changing for me lately. It's the ability to recognize any level of negativity within myself about any individual or even any situation. I may perceive a threat or a problem in any situation, or because of any person, the way they look, or the group that they're hanging out with, or whatever the case might be. I'm really starting to understand that I need to look within myself first, even when I think there's a problem somewhere else, instead of looking outside of me going, yep, that's the problem right there. You see, that's the problem. That thought process immediately puts me in a place of self-righteousness. It immediately gives me a soapbox. It immediately puts me at odds with the thing or the person I'm saying that's the problem. As much as I don't like realizing that whatever characteristic I see in another person that I don't like is somehow a reflection of myself. Just the fact that I can see it and recognize it and then become bitter about it is not their problem. That's my problem. We are not educated around emotional intelligence. We're not taught to look within and to think deeply at a personal level about how we're feeling in situations, right? But we definitely are educated or taught from a young age to blame and to look outside of ourselves like, oh, that group over there, that's a problem. They are a problem. And for the human ego, that feels really good to be able to pinpoint the problem, right? It's never me. It's always someone else. The ego is something that each one of us carries. It is built into our human nature, and it is the very thing that keeps us divided, keeps us hating. And I once heard someone say, I'd never thought about this before. I didn't do any research on it myself, but I heard someone talk about boarding schools in Europe ages ago, and how before colonialism began to spread from Europe, there was already a history of families sending their young men, especially, to these schools. And someone, I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was or where I heard this, but they insinuated that shipping the kids off to school was not helping them develop into moral, responsible, ethical human beings, and made the next step of colonialism and the way that's affected the world was kind of birthed out of this history of the kids being shipped off. And these were the next generation of leaders who would go out and discover the new worlds. I thought that was very, very interesting. Again, I didn't do any of my own research on that, but I thought it was worth thinking about, just from a human standpoint, that we all grow up wherever we grow up, and who we turn into as adults is the result of how we were taught, how much we were loved, how much connection we felt, how much self-worth we were allowed to feel. Someone mentioned, I'm sorry, I don't remember who, mentioned I happened to be, this particular grandfather happened to be the grandfather who didn't give me much attention. It's like, that's the root, right? It's like, at that young age, grandpa did not give you a certain amount of attention. What does a human being do, or how does a human being act when they are lacking that love, affection, attention, hands-on, emotional support, and the world keeps telling them you're not good enough, or or the world is telling them you actually are better than these people over here. So you take a wounded human being and also give them pride. You give them arrogance by saying you happen to be better than this group. But also that same human being is collecting this information from their own family members that says you're not good enough. What I'm saying is it's no wonder that we continue to experience the division and the hatred that we do when we're just trying to know ourselves, love ourselves, find acceptance, find love, all the values that we just talked about, peace and freedom. But all of that has to happen within me first before I can in any way be a part of that change in the world. But I have to find it for me. I have to find love and peace and freedom right here. If there's any amount of self-hatred within me, then it makes it just a fact that I will be hateful towards someone. That's just the fact of the matter. So when we talk about change, when we talk about healing and conversation, I need that healing and conversation and change to start with Lance. I have to start it just with me. Lance, what is your problem? What is it really that you are struggling with to like that other person? Stop thinking it's about them and just take a good look at yourself. What is really going on? What self-hatred did I, in a way, inherit through my lineage or my family because of the things that I heard or the way my parents or grandparents or siblings or cousins treated me? The issue of racism is such a large problem, but it can it's looking at the macro scale is really too much for us, I believe. Again, we've tried organizations and institutions and so on, right? That's trying to affect it at a macro scale, and we're still dealing with the same thing. But if we can come to the heart and deal with the division and hatred I feel just within myself, we just might begin to get somewhere and change things and make a difference in our own communities, which starts right within our own homes, right? Like that's the first community. It's my brain and my heart is community one, and then it's me, my children, my spouse, my friends. It branches out from there. You have any thoughts, Kim Perez? Many thoughts. I liked what you said last week about the colors within your own group, and I thought that was interesting.
I've had a lot of thinking, as I'm sure all of us have, because of just us living through history in the making. And I've actually gone into just researching and learning as much as I can about history, because as Lance is pointing out, this has been going on for hundreds of years, and still we're here with the same conundrum. Something that I learned recently that stood out to me is how what I learned in history is the I have a dream speech. What I learned just a few days ago is that a few years after that speech, Martin Luther King went on TV and said, the dream that I had how did he say it? The dream that I had has become a nightmare, and we have integrated into a house that is on fire. And it floored me. I actually heard somebody quoting it, and I stopped what I was doing to fact check it. And I actually watched those words come out of Martin Luther King's mouth, and I thought, so now what? What do we do in this house that's on fire? And that was well before I was born. And a movement of love is huge, because there's so much division on the political side of it that as I'm learning more and more of the history that I was never taught, Martin Luther King was very aware of and still was not able to make a dent in. So it starts with our communities, and something that we have as a wonderful experience in our generation is that we're in an age of digital technology. So our communities are larger than they were 50 years ago, and we can think globally, act locally, and recognize that our local community is bigger because of technology, and we can act from there. So, yeah.
Thank you, Kim. You know, I want to offer again, we're talking about such a large issue, and I don't think it's far-fetched to realize that just as individuals, we carry so much weight and baggage of our own that sometimes we're doing all we can just to deal with ourselves, right? Just to carry on another day. And I want to say that in the doing part, right? Just like, what do I do? I know it can be, this has been an overwhelming time for many of us because of what's been going on. And I think just doing what you can for yourself first, finding that division or inconsistency, as in you might find yourself saying one thing but acting a different way, right? Dealing with the internal warfare that we hold inside as humans, starting there is the place to start. It's good to know we have a huge macro problem, but then the what do we do just begins behind closed doors. Who are you when no one's watching? What are you saying to yourself when no one else is listening but you? What am I saying about white people when no one else is around? Really taking a good look at myself. Are there any other thoughts, stories, questions? No? Okay.
Okay, so I totally agree with what you're saying on looking within me. You know, just being here and hearing stories and, you know, going through the talks and everything like that, you know, it's really kicking up stuff that I didn't know that was there. Like, for instance, I wanted to bring my kids here. I gave them the option, like last minute, do you want to come, you know, everything like that. You know, at first it was like, okay, I want you to come because you need to hear these conversations. but at the same time, I was just kind of, it speaks exactly to what you were saying. There are certain things I was taught on how to operate that I don't want to teach my kids, but at the same time, I feel if I don't teach them to them, I'm throwing them to the wolves. I'm setting them up for heartbreak. I'm setting them up for the reality of what I know, what my parents know, what my grandparents know, what my great-grandparents know. I mean, it's better, you know, it's better. It's just the way I see it now is like it was overt, and now it's behind, you know, behind closed doors. Like you won't see it. Like somebody could say something that in their mind it's not racist, it's not, you know, anything like that, but automatically that's where my brain goes to. But at the same time, that's what I was taught. I was taught to be very aware of what's being said, you know, what's being said, what's being shown to me, what's in front of you. Like it's like I see the world in a different lens, and I don't want to teach that to my kids, but it's so hard not to, like, you know, for better context, I'm married to a white woman. I have 3 kids. One lives in Texas, and the other 2 live up here, and they're all biracial, and so in the communities that I've always run, I grew up in the suburbs. It was predominantly white. You know, I can count the number of black kids that were in my school, or in my grade. I'm sorry, in my grade, from kindergarten to 5th grade. There's only 5 of us, and just thinking back is like we all operated the same way. I mean, some of them, you know, they kind of, you know, they did their own thing, but we all operated in a certain type of way. So as we got older and started getting, you know, into 6th grade or middle school, high school and everything like that, you know, things started changing. There was more of us and everything like that, you know, because we came from, you know, all different areas or whatever, and the area started growing. But it was always the same thing. It's like, you know, we click up, we, you know, talk this, talk that, and it's just a perpetuation of the same narrative over and over and over again. And now that I have kids, it's like, you know, my oldest, she's 17, and with the current events and everything like that, you know, I used to always tell her, I'm like, you know, the world's gonna see you as a black woman. There's no getting around it. You know, she would roll her eyes, as a, you know, teenager should, and tell me, you know, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, it's times have changed and everything like that. And I couldn't say anything. At that point, I couldn't say anything because I had to step back and let her live her life and see what it is. And I've talked to her, you know, recently, and she's losing friends left and right because she's starting to realize, and it's like, it breaks my heart because I was hoping I wouldn't, you know, at this point as I'm speaking, I was hoping that something like that wouldn't happen. Like, she's like, I know that can turn her heart cold, because it's honestly, it's turned my heart cold in certain, you know, situations and everything like that. There's certain demographics, certain you know, like I said before, certain ways I operate around certain people, and I'm not being 100% myself, and I don't know how to turn it off. Like, I have no idea how to just be okay with being me, and it sucks. So at the same, you know, just how I started, it's like I want to be able to tell my kids, hey, this is what you need to watch out for, but I know that's not going to breed change at all. But I can't let go of that feeling of like, hey, you know, like the story of your son running through the neighborhood. That scared me. You know, like I wake up and, you know, I live out in Eagle River and I'm running through the neighborhood. It's like 5:30, 6 in the morning, and I don't run my normal route. You know, they have trails and everything, you know, everything like that. I don't run my normal route through the trails. I run my route on the street. And this is happening as I'm running. Like, all right, you know, I'm about to make it right here. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't. And then I'll go on the, you know, the main street. So where I'm not tucked behind anyone's house. I'm nowhere near, you know, running through someone's yard, or, you know, a lot of them come out through cul-de-sacs and everything like that. And it's like, you know, I had to laugh at myself. Like, why are you, you know, thinking of this? Like, but I noticed in that moment that that's just how I think. And it sucks. It sucks to have to realize, like, in this moment, you know, I'm almost 40, and I can't remember a time at all that life in this macro situation hasn't been like this. Like my first introduction was Rodney King, Spike Lee movies, Public Enemy, you know, did a biography on Malcolm X, you know, I mean, all this, like, it's a way of life at this point, and it's something that I don't want to pass down to my kids, but in the same sense, I feel like I have to. Like, I don't want to leave them, you know, out, stuck, you know. It's just, it is what it is at this point for me. But I can feel the pull on which direction should I go. Like, I don't know. So yeah, the conversations at home, the conversations with yourself, how you think, how you look at, you know, different people is very important, because I know my kids, even my oldest, up until this point, she didn't think like that. And I never, you know, my oldest, I never really overtly, like, told her, hey, this is what it is, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I made sure to slide it in there every so often. Hey, watch out. You do know you're a black girl. They're going to look at you a certain type of way. And, you know, I might have, you know, continued that thought process in her. My youngest, they're not there yet. And I don't think, I'm hoping, I'm hoping by the time they get, you know, where they need to be, or old enough that they can see the world differently than what it is right now. Thank you.
Chris, is your daughter here in Anchorage? Your 17-year-old? Yeah. Okay. So you were saying that because of Black Lives Matter kind of blowing up the way that it has, she's finally beginning to experience systemic racism for the first time. Right. Yeah. You know, the search for identity, the search for meaning, being able to answer the question of who am I? We realize the world is a broken place for many reasons, but I don't have to be broken, right? We as individuals don't have to be broken. So again, back to healing, right? It's like going within, knowing who you are, while still knowing that the world is broken. But being able to pass the healing on so that one person at a time, one day at a time, the world becomes a safer place, a better place. It becomes a place that upholds the very values we've said that we believe all of humanity wants. But there's no way to trickle love and peace and freedom. There's no way to trickle it down from the top. Those are the very values that our country was supposed to be built on, right? Supposed to be. That was the language that was used. That was the Constitution that was written. But we can see how we can use the words all day long and mean something very different, right? Well, it's peace and freedom for some people, not really everyone. Or we'll say that now you can have peace and freedom, but really, it's not exactly what we had in mind, right? And there's a lot of drama, or there's a lot of hurt centered around that. At least for my part, I realize I can't look to the government or any institutions to bring about those life values. I'm the person who has to bring that about, and you are the person who has to bring that about. Yeah. Well, if there's no more stories or any other questions, things you'd like to share, we can end it there. I know there may be some individual things you'd like to share one-on-one with me. I'm a very open, very emotional being, so don't hesitate to pull me aside if you want to talk further. Anything else, anyone? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for coming.